Before we jump into today's episode, I want to ask you a question. When was the last time you truly rested? Not collapsed on the couch exhausted, but intentionally stepped away from the demands of your life and filled your own cup. If it's been a while, this might be for you. There are now only 2 spots left for my Bali retreat this August, and it's my final retreat for 2026. From August 17 to 21, we'll be spending 4 beautiful nights in Bali. Think daily devotional practices, delicious nourishing food, heavenly massages, deep rest, meaningful connection, and a few little surprises along the way. If you're ready to step away from the noise, reconnect with yourself, and return home feeling rested, restored, and deeply nourished, I'd love to have you join us. Send me a DM to find out more, or you can head to the show notes for all the retreat details. Now let's kick off this week's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Alexandra McRobert. Alexandra is a yoga teacher, meditation guide, and founder of the Mindful Life Practice and Mindful Bali Yoga School. A Canadian living in Bali, she has taught yoga and mindfulness around the world for more than a decade and has trained yoga teachers since 2021. Alexandra's work is deeply informed by her own journey in recovery and her passion for supporting women who are exploring an alcohol-free life. Since getting sober in 2019, she has become a passionate advocate for creating spaces where women can heal, reconnect with themselves, and build meaningful community. She published her book, Sober Yoga Girl, in 2024 and hosts the Sober Yoga Girl podcast. She has led retreats for sober and sober-curious women, taught for recovery communities and events internationally, and speaks openly about the intersection of spirituality, authenticity, and recovery. Drawing from yoga philosophy, meditation, bhakti yoga, and the wisdom of the 12 steps, Alexandra offers a compassionate and grounded approach to sobriety that emphasizes connection rather than perfection. She believes recovery is not simply about giving something up, but about creating a life rooted in purpose, presence, and belonging. Through her writing, her teaching, and her community work, Alexandra is passionate about helping women discover that an alcohol-free life can be joyful, spiritual, and deeply meaningful. Now, Alex and I had the incredible opportunity to meet each other in person when I was back in Bali. It actually totally happened by accident. It was completely the universe conspiring to make it happen, which I love. And we connected. And since then, I had the opportunity to join Alex on her podcast. She's now here to connect with you guys today. And I am just so excited. So I'm going to stop talking. Alex, hi, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I'm doing well. How are you, Ash?
I'm so good. I feel like I just got to hang out with you recently, so I'm feeling very blessed to be able to have another chat again today and to be able to see you in a few weeks when I'm back over in Bali. So yeah, like I said, I just feel like the universe is putting everything together for a reason, and it's just awesome to be back here again with you chatting today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's going to be good. So we're going to kick off straight away with some nice, simple questions. Tell us, Alexandra, where do you live? What does an average day look like? And what do you do for fun?
Yeah, so I live in Ubud in Bali, and I teach yoga both online and in person. And so an average day would look like I'm up in the morning either teaching an online yoga class or teaching for a local studio, and I teach every day at 7:30. And then throughout the day, it's kind of random. Like I'll go to Pilates, or I'll have a personal training session, or I teach private one-on-one, like coaching and harmonium playing. And then I sing in a lot of kirtans, whether I'm leading them on my own or whether I'm singing with people. So at night, I'm usually at a kirtan. And yeah, it's a pretty rich and beautiful life. And I guess the answer to what I do for fun is kirtan is probably it. Like I consider that like my hobby. And for those listening that have never participated in a kirtan, it's a community chanting session, and we're all singing together and making music, and people are dancing, and in Ubud, it's kind of like the Kirtan capital. Like there's usually one happening every single night. And actually me and my friend were joking last night that we need to make like a Kirtan alliance, like the yoga.
Totally.
Yeah. It's so yeah, I would say that that's my for fun activity.
Amazing. I mean, just the thought of living in Ubud in Bali just is such an inspiration to me. It's something that I definitely know that it's somewhere in my destiny that to be living in Bali at some stage throughout my life. How did you end up there?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Such a great question. So okay, I'll the short version of the story, I'll keep it as short as I can, is that I was living in Kuwait when I was 23. And, the actual truth is that I think I wanted to go to Bali long before I had even been to Asia. Back in 2014, before I had even really left North America area, I actually remember doing a yoga class with a teacher called Ian Finn, who teaches trainings every year in Bali. And he talked about his Bali YTT. And I remember that was on like my short list that I was like pitching to my parents of like where I should do my YTT, which seems so funny in hindsight because they didn't even pay for my YTT. So I don't know why they like were involved in where I went. But yeah, I ended up doing my YTT in Mexico, which was beautiful, but I think I had this longing for Bali for a long time. And so then in 2015, I moved to Kuwait, and that was where I was working as a school teacher. And so I ended up in my time there meeting this guy, and we ended up getting married when I was 25, and we were planning a honeymoon to Bali. And so we were planning this big trip to Bali, and it was both of our first big trip to somewhere so far. And so we were going to do a 2-week honeymoon in Bali, and then I was going to stay and do a month-long YTT. So I was going to be there for like the whole summer, basically. And then we basically broke up like the night of our flight to Bali. And
Hang on a minute. So you got married, and then before your honeymoon, it was over.
yeah, we were married for
Oh
like 2 months.
Wow.
And the entire 2 months, it was like this really intense, my life is ending kind of feeling. Like every day I felt like the world was ending and I should not be married to this person. It's honestly quite amazing that I made it for as long, like that I made it for 2 months to the marriage. But yeah, I finally left him on the night of our flight to Bali. And it's like, it's one of these things where it's like, I should have, but I knew from like the moment I married him that we shouldn't have been married. And yet I just kept trying to convince myself that it would be fine for that long. And I look back and I'm like, if I had just ended things like as soon as I knew, it would have caused us both a lot less suffering. But anyway, we stayed together for 2 months. We broke up the night of the Bali flight, and I was able to so I didn't go to Bali. Neither of us went to Bali in the end. I don't think he ever came to Bali in the end, actually. He might have, but I flew back to Canada, did mental health care. I think he stayed in the Middle East. And then I couldn't get this YTT refunded that I had signed up for. And so I ended up coming out to Bali 2 months after the original plan. I came on my own, and I was in such a deep state of like major depression at this point. And I still wasn't sober. I got sober a year and a half later, but I was in such a deep state of depression that it felt like everything was like grayscale. And I described to people the moment that I came to Bali, it was like I was like seeing in color again. And I just knew that I was going to live here one day. And the actual transition into Bali was bumpy because then I went back to the Middle East. So I was living in the Middle East through my whole 20s. And so I went back, I got a new job, and basically drank myself into recovery, like drank myself into this bottom about a year and a half later. And that was when I was like, okay, I need to stop drinking. And then it was like, I need to, like, what am I doing? Basically living in this place that I don't want to be in, doing this job I don't really want to do. And then I kind of had to organize my life around moving to Bali. So it wasn't like so quick. But yeah, I ended up coming back here I think I moved here about 2 years after I got sober. And in my sobriety, I was basically just building a business and a life that enabled the move.
Wow, what a journey to arrive there. Can we go back a moment? Because I feel like this is going to
Yeah.
tie into your photo. So, Alex, you brought in a photo today from a time in your life where you were hiding behind a smile, presenting one version of yourself externally, but internally it was a very different story. Could you describe for our audience the photo that I'm bringing up on the screen right now? What are we looking at here, and what was actually going on for you at that time in your life?
Yeah. So in this photo, it's about probably a few days before I got sober. And my mom took that photo of me. We were sitting on a rooftop in Morocco having a glass of wine. And that trip to Morocco. So the interesting thing about at this point, I had been in the Middle East for 4 years. I moved to the Middle East in 2015, and this was 2019 when the photo was taken. And I originally moved to a country, Kuwait, where alcohol is completely illegal. And I knew that going into it. And yet in my time in Kuwait, I knew I had an issue because within a week, I was learning how to make alcohol and I was like networking with people who could get me alcohol, but I still was okay. Like there's certain pockets in the Middle East where you cannot buy alcohol because it's like a Muslim town or a Muslim city or a Muslim country or whatever. And so I remember my mom and I did a trip to Jordan in 2016. And one of the first places we went to was one of these alcohol-free zones. And I was totally fine with that. You know, like I had said to my mom, hey, we're going to Wadi Rum. We're going to be staying with like the sheikh. There's no alcohol there. And she's like, what? Like I remember having this conversation and me being the one that was fine with it. And so the wild thing is that then 2 years later, we're in the exact same circumstance. We're in Morocco. We're getting the talk of like, these are the cities and towns where there's no alcohol. And I was like loading up my backpack with booze. Like I was making sure that we could find it everywhere. I don't think there was anywhere where I didn't have access to alcohol because I felt like I needed it no matter where we were. And so I look back on my Morocco trip and I don't think I was cognizant of it at the time, but my addiction had like escalated so much that I couldn't like enjoy anything about the Morocco trip because I was like just thinking about where and how I was going to get booze and if I was going to run out. And I actually think a couple days before that photo was taken, it was my birthday. And I got really I didn't get mad at my mom, but we had bought one bottle of wine up this mountain to this homestay. And I was like mad that there wasn't enough. Like I told my mom she couldn't share it with anyone else because my mom was always like offering people wine. And I was like, Mom, you can share this because we're going to run out and it's my birthday, you know? And so I just look back and I'm like, wow, so much effort and energy was going into me making sure that I could be drunk, basically.
It is so consuming when you're in that stage of addiction, right? Like everything you do revolves around being able to get the next drink. And I remember just as you shared that, it brought me back to a time. So my birthday's Christmas Day, and most of the bottle shops in Australia aren't open on Christmas Day. So everyone does like a big shop on Christmas Eve, and then that's your booze for the following day. And I remember we were up in Noosa with my ex-husband and my mum at the time, and we had run out of alcohol at lunch. And I was like climbing walls, just like waiting until a restaurant would open so that I could go to the restaurant, order a starter or an appetizer so that they would give me a bottle of wine just so that I could like get it in. Like it was that real, that need of like that fix. Like I had to get it. And I wasn't present for Christmas Day. I wasn't even present for my birthday because all I could think about was being able to get that next drink. It's almost like an enslavement in a way, isn't it? Like
Totally.
it's this mental enslavement. So after that trip, did you have would you describe it as a rock bottom moment where you were like, okay, this can't happen anymore? Like what was this transition into what is now, full-time sobriety or long-term sobriety?
Yeah. So when I think back to one of my rock bottoms, it was actually before the Morocco trip. But I was constantly being like, well, I can't quit drinking because of like this, that, and the other thing, And so in the time period leading up to my sobriety, there was like a whole bunch of stuff going on for me. Like I was backpacking through Southeast Asia, and then I was going with some colleagues on a weekend away to Norway. And then one of my best childhood friends was coming out to Abu Dhabi because her brother was competing in the Special Olympics. And so there were just like a ton of things happening where I was like, I can't get sober because it's going to like ruin all these occasions, basically.
Mm.
But there was one night, so right before my mom got to Abu Dhabi, maybe 2 weeks before was when my childhood friend and her dad were there in Abu Dhabi. And so there were these ladies' nights in Abu Dhabi where women could drink for free every night of the week. And I had like a running map in my head. Like I still could probably even tell you some of the dates and the deals, like at different venues of like what you could drink and where. And so I was going to those all the time. And so I brought them to a ladies' night at, oh gosh, what was this place called? It was like I think it was like a Mexican themed bar on Yaz Island. But anyway, the point is I brought them to this ladies' night and it was like all you can drink wine. And and this was a work night. And by the end of the night, I was so drunk that I could not tell the taxi driver where my address was. I couldn't even write substitute lesson plans. And then thank goodness my car was in the shop. My car had just broken down and was getting repaired. So the next morning, I didn't drive to work. One of my colleagues drove me into work. I think about that all the time. And I'm like, I would have probably crashed a car because I was like so drunk. And I got into work and everyone thought it was like really funny. I had run into my boss earlier that night and he had actually tried to buy me a drink and then found out it was ladies' night and was like, oh, you can drink for free. And so he knew that I had gone out and he saw me and everyone just like thought it was hilarious. And I'm just like, that is so wild to me that like that is funny, you know? And so what I remember is having a recess where the kids went out to play and I lay down on the carpet and one of my students came into the room and was just like, oh my God, are you sleeping? And this to me, and I didn't publicly, and I taught 6-year-old kids, you know, and I didn't publicly tell this story for a long time until I was far enough away from teaching that I was like, okay, it doesn't matter. Like I'm never going to try to be a teacher in the Middle East again. Because that is just like wild to me that was what was happening. But yeah, I knew then like I have to get sober. And but because me and my mom had this trip planned, I was like, I can't get sober until after the trip, basically. And so I think I knew throughout I think we were in Morocco for 2 weeks and I knew the entire time that it like the end was near. And so then it was just kind of like, just letting that whole thing play out. And when I got on the plane from Morocco to Canada, Morocco to Abu Dhabi, so me and my mom split up at the end. My mom went back to Canada and I went to Abu Dhabi. And on the plane, I was like, okay, this is like day one of sobriety, basically.
Wow. That's, oh God, I remember that feeling so bad. I remember towards the end as well, it just wasn't even fun anymore.
Yeah.
It was like I was drinking because it was so habitual. I was absolutely like physically addicted to it by the end as well. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, it's almost like for me, I was chasing the good old days for about 10, 15 years. Like it was only fun for me for like maybe the first 5 years. And then after that, it just became consequences. And yet I had this delusion that I could somehow recapture the good old days if I just, changed my environment or changed the people that I was with. But like inevitably it was me. It was my relationship with this substance that was just like slowly destroying my soul.
Totally.
So how did you do it? I'm so interested. Like you're living in Abu Dhabi right now. You're on your own essentially. Like, did you go to 12-step? Did you listen to podcasts? Like what did you do?
Yeah. Okay. So there was at the time that I was in Abu Dhabi, the Middle East in general, the 12-step was very hush hush because alcohol is such a haram thing that even access to recovery or discussion about recovery is like not talked about. And so it's changed since then, which is amazing. I've checked it out because I've gone back and they seem to have daily meetings now that are publicly listed addresses. And so it's amazing. But at the time when I was first getting sober, in order to access a 12-step meeting there, you had to like text a guy. Like there was no publicly listed address. There was no, yeah. And I think there were 3 meetings a week. And I'm sure like in hindsight, I'm like, if I got into it, I probably would have discovered like a lot more than what was available at the surface. But it seemed that there was 3 meetings a week and you had to text someone. And because of that, it felt like a lot of barriers to access. And I had all my own kind of preconceptions and judgments and blah, blah, blah. And so I actually ended up, well, a big thing that was going on was there was this online group that was marketing towards me on social media about paying for like a membership to go alcohol free. And I don't think they exist anymore. But that is what got me sober. And so I joined this group and they sent me daily emails. But what they did was they had this Facebook group and that was like the value of it. And I was afraid to join for like the first 7 days because I didn't want anyone to see. And then I was like, I have to join this group. And there were 6,000 people in it in the time. And you could post in the group. Yeah, now it grew to like 30,000. It was amazing towards the end. But yeah, you would post in the group and people would comment and they also were like, you should find a buddy. And so through that I would post like, hey, I'm in the Middle East. And there was this little group of us, like I think there were 10 of us that were part of the group that were in the UAE. And so we started meeting up and getting together. And that was my sobriety community. I also was working for a gym at the time where I was teaching yoga for them. And then they had me trained to do spinning and bar instruction. And that gym also closed too, actually. But they had classes like all afternoon from like 4 p.m. until like 9 p.m. And so I was just there all the time, like teaching and practicing.
Busy.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about the Middle East is because there's so many Muslim people and people from all walks of life that it's very normal. Like in the gym culture that I was part of, like it was really normal for like 50% of the people at any event to not be drinking, And so it wasn't the same, like the drinking culture around my expat colleagues was bad. But if I got into like the gym local community, like, half the people in my classes were Muslim. And so they weren't drinking at all. And it was just a very healthy environment. And then I think I got sober a couple weeks before Ramadan, which again, Ramadan's like the most holy month where, even if people did drink, like they're not really drinking at that time. And so it was just like a culture that supported me in the journey. And so that was me for like the first year of sobriety. And then in 2020, that's when everything changed in Feb 2020, because that's when the COVID lockdown started. And so up until this point, I had built this I had started kind of growing an online following through these Facebook groups about my sobriety and my yoga teaching and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden it was Zoom yoga. And I started teaching online Zoom yoga for the sobriety group that I was part of. And that was like basically the beginning of Sober Girls Yoga, because I would get on these Zoom calls with people. And that was my first time being in a room of sober people in my life. I'd have like 20 people on the call. And I would do this like informal little circle and then we do a yoga class. And that then grew into Sober Girls Yoga. Although I had the idea for Sober Girls Yoga long before, I just needed like the movement. And so I basically created the sobriety community that I wished I had. And I was running these sober challenges, and then we get together for sober circles and do yoga classes online. And that basically sustained me for a really long time.
It's incredible to think like, we were chatting about this on your podcast, like that first domino to fall. It's like sobriety is this thing that keeps us trapped in this cage that we've created ourselves, really. And then you let go of this one thing that you think you can't do life without, and all of a sudden your entire life opens up. Because in my mind, I see yoga as being so intertwined with recovery. Like they're both these spiritual practices, and more, I find that I'm talking to people who are sober and they're telling me about their own pathway into yoga. But you found yoga before you got sober, which I think is also really curious. Tell me more about that, and how has your relationship with the practice changed before getting sober and now that you're sober?
Yeah, so I found yoga before I even drank, actually, because I started yoga when I was a kid. Yeah. And I did my first yoga session when I was 10. It was like a yoga for kids thing at school. Yeah. And then I did yoga for teens when I was like 14. And then in age 15, 16, that was when I started drinking. And then my practice like sort of dropped off, and then it really picked up again when I was 18. And that's when I started practicing every single day. And I honestly, I believe that yoga and sobriety are the same thing, right? We're striving to come into like a state of consciousness and a state of union. And so I actually feel quite um, I just have such interesting feelings about this. And I used to participate in it, but you see the modern world with having like yoga and like vinyasa and vino and like yoga at the brewery. And, you see retreats where there's alcohol or yoga teacher trainings where people are having champagne at the end of their YTT. And I'm like, I just find this so interesting because I don't see that we can come into a state of like present moment union and be consuming like mind altering substances like alcohol or like drugs. Like to me, they're just not matching. But I think at the time that I was looking for anything that would help me cope. And so yoga helped me cope. Alcohol helped me cope. And I do believe that like I was saying this morning in my yoga class that I don't really like the way the West is turning yoga into what it is, but it's like a doorway for people who just like want to come stretch. And if they're lucky to end up in a class with someone who's teaching, like giving a peek of like, hey, this is what's behind the door. Like there's so much more depth to this that you'll discover that there's this world much beyond, just the asana. And so I think for me, it's interesting because I've been teaching yoga now for 12 years. And right before I got sober, my yoga teaching and practice was like the worst it had ever been. Like there was no one coming to my classes. And I think that's a direct reflection of like how I was so unhappy and I was suffering so much and so discontented that I think people felt that energy from me. Right. And even if you can't place your finger on it, you're like, something is not quite connecting here. And then as soon as I got sober, everything started opening up for me. Like I started teaching at another gym and my classes had like 30, 40 people in them, and so it just shows that my regular drinking alcohol and my yoga practice just didn't, they were clashing. It had to be one or the other. And so, yeah, I see yoga and sobriety as like the same thing. And I think I ended up getting into 12 steps. And the reason that I love the 12 steps so much in AA meetings so much is that I feel like they're practicing the same principles as in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And I haven't found anyone in the yoga world that's sitting around talking about how to practice these principles in our affairs, right? Whereas this is what's happening in the 12-step rooms. And so I actually have this mind where I go into 12-step and I'm listening to people talk and my mind is just connecting to where in Patanjali's sutras this concept is coming from, And so I believe they're deeply interrelated and they go hand in hand. And I think the postures of yoga, the asana, prepare us deeply for meditation, which is the 11th step in the 12 steps. And so I think for everyone in recovery, it's in service to start to develop a yoga practice because it's going to support everything on your journey after that.
I geek out on this so hard. And I know you do too, in terms of, I still remember where I was sitting when I was doing my 200-hour YTT and I was being introduced to the yamas and the niyamas, and my jaw was like perpetually on the floor because I was like, what do you mean? Like, Satya is truthfulness, which is to live an honest life, like that, or like letting go of control, handing it over, like that's a paragraph. Like my mind was just, I couldn't believe it. I felt like I had this real moment of like, oh my goodness, you're exactly where you're meant to be right now, Ash. For somebody who's listening along right now and hasn't studied the sutras, or maybe isn't really aware of what we're talking about right now, can you just share maybe one, like what's your favorite one at the moment that you feel like links back really beautifully to the 12 steps or your own recovery journey in terms of the yamas and niyamas for now?
Oh, gosh, there's so many good ones.
I know.
I think, okay, so there's the first two yama, which I believe if you don't know anything else about the rest of it, you can just know these two and you can do the rest because it's all the same. So the first is Ahimsa, which is like love everyone, nonviolence. And then Satya, which you mentioned, is tell the truth, right? And so love everyone and tell the truth. And that's essentially how you're gonna, like, if we come to the 12 steps and we think about taking inventory and making amends and then in every day trying to act to take right actions and then make amends if at the end of the day we're like, oh, we've caused suffering. That's essentially those two things, right? It's like I'm practicing love towards everyone and then I'm telling the truth. Like if I screwed something up, I'm just like being honest with the people around me about like how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking.
I love that you've just chosen Ahimsa and Satya, because isn't it also, I remember my sponsor and I often will talk about, you can be honest, but don't be harmful. Because I think sometimes people can then think, all right, well, I have to tell the truth. So I have to say, oh, that outfit looks terrible on you. It's, well, no, because Ahimsa means that we're not causing harm to others. So it's about, and within that, the practice of discernment and realizing, does this need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? Such beautiful practices to come back to. But you're so right. Those first two are paramount to basically the rest of them unfolding anyway, which is so cool. I'd never thought of it like that. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm curious, when you moved to yoga, when you moved to Bali, you're 2 years sober. When did you then find the space that you're in now? You have the most beautiful yoga shala above your home where, oh my goodness, it was absolutely breathtaking when I had the opportunity to visit your space recently. That is such an incredible vision that you've obviously brought to life. And I think that takes real courage and something that I think not everybody has in terms of the ability to really believe in yourself, to have that vision and then to execute it. So tell me about how all of that unfolded for you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I came to Bali in 2021 and the first little while in Bali was really hard. I think coming from Abu Dhabi where things were just really flowing for me and there weren't a lot of there were yoga teachers there, but there wasn't really anyone doing this yoga and sobriety thing. And, the time zones were just working and everything was working for me with my online business. And then I think Bali kind of, challenged me in that I felt like there were so many yoga teachers here and there was so much going on. And I just had low self-confidence. And so things in my Bali timeline, I would say really stalled. And I was still teaching online and I was still doing retreats and trainings, but I wasn't really making moves. And I did have this dream about buying a retreat center for a long time, which was just a really wild dream because it was going to cost me I think it was $1 million US. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. My psychic was like, yeah, you're going to buy it. And that's 5 minutes from where I live now. And so that was kind of my concept. Wow. And then my life really changed, last January. So last January, I had a pretty traumatic incident happen. So I was, drugged and assaulted by someone that I was dating. And this was the pivotal moment for me because I think when something like that happens, so that was the first incident that happened. And I actually didn't realize that it had happened. And we're finding more and more out about this type of stuff happening to women regularly, which is so terrifying. But I didn't know that it happened for about a week since I was dating him and I stayed with him and he ended up physically assaulting me a week later. And that was the first time I've ever experienced this type of violence in a relationship. But it after this 2-month, there was this 2-month period of, I would say shock, and PTSD that I really had to work through with a number of, I did every type of therapy you can imagine, Western and Eastern, just because I just knew that I had to recover as quick as possible to keep my business going basically, because I couldn't teach yoga and be like this. And there was this pivotal moment about 2 months later. And so I had a leasehold on this house. And when I moved into this house, I had climbed up on the roof and I had been I want to build a yoga shala here, but then I didn't do it. And then it was about 2 months after the assault that I sort of had this huge internal shift. And I think it was realizing, because it almost felt like I'd come close to death twice in 1 week, with the drugging and then, the physical assault that this guy later did. So he attempted to strangle me. And that was when I left him. And when something like that happens to you, it's your whole life changes because you're I don't know why I'm not doing all these things that I've always dreamed of, And so the first thing was I'm building a yoga shala here. And so I built this little shala on the roof of my house that fit 4 yoga mats. That was the first Shala. And then it got so busy so quickly with people wanting to come practice and take classes and blah, 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 that I ended up renovating and expanding shortly after, because I could see that if we expanded and put in a wooden floor, then we could fit 10 mats. And so in September of last year, that was when I did the expansion. And then at the same time, I also started leading Kirtans. So I had bought this harmonium and just learned to play. And that was something I wanted to do for like 12 years. And then it was right around April. It was after I built the Shala that I sang in my first Kirtan with my teacher. And now I was saying, like, I just did 3 nights in a row of Kirtan, which is wild. I need to be putting in some boundaries around how much I'm singing, because it's just like exhausting. But yeah, I had these like 2 huge shifts. And it's one of these things where it's like, so this home that I moved into, it feels like such a manifestation, because I had literally, I was living in this retreat center and they had been allowing me to run classes there. And then I had to move out. And my friend just said to me, like, write down on a list all the things that you dream of in a home. And I found this house, and my list was like, I want there to be a rooftop where I can build a yoga shala. I want there to be 2 bedrooms, one that I can convert into a living room with a bathroom for the guests. And I want it to be 10 minutes closer to Ubud. And then I went on Facebook, and this was like the house that I saw. And the wild thing about it is that, so I have a leasehold. I don't own this house, but the landowner was like totally down for like whatever. He's like, yeah, you can turn it into a business. You know what I mean? And so it's just been like, the universe aligned for it to happen for me. And when I think back to how I made it so inaccessible, of like, oh, I'm going to like buy this retreat center for $1 million, which is wild, because now I'm basically paying the rent that I would be paying for any home, but I have a yoga shala in the house. And so it makes it very low stress, because the classes have been really slow, for example, lately, but I'm like, every time this happens, I'm like, okay, it's just time to rest and chill. And, there's no pressure the way there would be if I were leaseholding like an actual commercial space in town. And so it's just like the universe, if it's meant to be, the universe will just align for things to happen.
Oh, so true, isn't it? It's just about allowing yourself to be in that flow state. And that's really the marker now with my decision making each and every day. Does it feel easy? Does it feel like it's in flow, or am I pushing up against resistance? And if I am, as much as I want it to happen, maybe the way I think I want it to happen, it's a no. The universe is saying no. And the quicker I can respond to that, the easier my life becomes, because back in the day, I would just push up against it constantly and then wonder why things really bad were happening all the time to me.
Totally.
It's crazy. Something that I really relate to in my drinking days, which I kind of feel like has been the same for you, was living a life that was out of alignment of that flow state. And so, it takes us to different places. It puts us in the wrong relationships. A mentor of mine says, I had a broken picker for like all these years. Like, I kept dating the wrong people. But a lot of the time with alcohol in the picture, it's because you are actually inebriated. You don't have the capacity. If you're meeting people drunk all the time, you're not actually thinking about, is this person, well, for me anyway, I was never thinking about, is this person right for me? If anything, I was just like, oh, they've picked me. So let's go with this. Let's see how this works. And then I was just having a conversation with a girlfriend the other day about how I think a lot of the time people can fall into relationships, and if their relationship is built around, drinking a bottle of wine together every night, you're not actually ever like having that soul to soul connection, because there's this substance that's kind of blurring the edges of that. And as a result, people end up in relationships that aren't right for them, and yet they stay stuck because they don't know how to leave. What do you think the effect alcohol had on your decision to get married? Because I think that's still a really interesting point. And then I want to talk about the realizations you've had more recently along your sobriety journey about your sexuality and dating and where you're at now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. It's such an interesting question, because my ex that I was with, so a big reason why I married this man, the reason why I dated basically everyone that I dated in Kuwait was anyone that could give me access to alcohol, because alcohol was illegal. So there were people that I dated who had access to nicer homemade alcohol than me. There were people I dated who could get me into embassies. And this guy that I married, his company, he was working for a company in the United Arab Emirates that had put him on placement in Kuwait. And Kuwait was like a hardship post. And so for all the men that are in hardship posts in these oil companies, they give them flights to the UAE every weekend where they can just drink. And so me and him I was able to get flights with him. We'd go every 2 weeks. We'd stay in these 5-star hotels and drink the entire day. We'd start drinking at like 8 a.m. We start drinking as soon as we could. And actually an interesting thing about him is that he's also sober. And I didn't know that until I published my book. And I reached out to him and said like, hey, I'm publishing this book. And we got sober right around the same time. So we have the same amount of sobriety, which is like wild. So we obviously just found each other and we're like, great, we can enable each other's addictions. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so I think that was a huge part of me marrying him was that, was the access he could give me to change my life in the Middle East, you know? And then a huge part of it too was I think so I grew up, so I'm queer now, and I don't often say, I've more and more been identifying with the word lesbian just because I don't want to date men anymore. I'm like, I don't want to be with men. So it's just easier to like use this term. But I believe that as a child, I think we're all so socialized to be straight that there wasn't even a question that I could be gay as like a child. It was like, okay, I like princesses, I like music, I like singing, I like the color pink, therefore I'm straight. And I remember my parents, well, it was my mom in particular, and she meant no harm on this, but she was like, I remember as a young child, she would always tell me that my life trajectory was like, I had to go to university and then get a job and then get married and then have kids. That was like the 4 things. And I think she was trying to prevent me like being a teen mom or something. I don't know why this was like coached into me as a child, but I think I just had a really strong pathway of like, this is like, you know, what you're going to do. And so there was never like in high school, I actually kissed a girl. There was a gay girl in high school that really liked me. And we hooked up and she was like, you're gay. And I was like, I'm not. And I genuinely did. I was like, I'm not gay. I don't think I am. Boys are asking me out and I'm going out with them. And so like, you know what I mean? There was just like no question that there could be any other option. And I do think with the guy that I married, I do think there was part of me that was like, okay, this is what love is. This person loves me so much that he wants to marry me and he wants to create a life with me and he wants to have kids with me. And so this is what love is. And so I don't think it's going to get any better than this. So I should marry him, you know? And I don't know if I told you this, I told this story for 7 years and my truth of this story was that I didn't think he was the right person for me to marry. And now I'm like, is it that I was never even attracted to men? Like, I don't know. Because I've been straight until like very recently. So I don't really know what this feeling was of like, I have to get out of this marriage. But so this assault I had last year was like a massive catalyst for this in me too. And so I ended up dating one man since the assault. And that was a good friend of mine who I used to run retreats with. And I said to him, like, I will never feel safe with another man again unless it's you. And I think I looking back on that, I'm like, I feel like I knew that was like the last guy that I was ever going to date. And I was like with some men in this time period, but I just like didn't want to do it anymore. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I'm like not interested at all in being with men. And so I actually went on a 10-day Vipassana in December. And that was when I had this catalytic thing of like, oh my God, I think I'm a lesbian. This is crazy. And then the work that comes with that, because your whole identity is shifting. And like, I didn't realize how much like self-hatred I had and how much shame and like how much there had to be to face around all of that. And yeah, so it's been like a really interesting time. I think I was saying before that I feel like I have to declare I'm a lesbian like all the time because everyone thinks I'm straight. Men ask me out all the time still. And I'm like, I just like, and so I will directly just say to men, like, I'm a lesbian. But it's hard. And living in Bali, in a place where, so in Indonesia in general, it's an Islamic country. And so same-sex marriage isn't legal. There's no like queer community here, no pride, nothing like that. And so there isn't really like public events I could go to like meet other queer people. Basically, there are queer people. There's a lot more gay men than lesbian women. But yeah, I dated one woman, which was amazing. And it definitely like threw me into just like stepping into myself and my identity. And that was great. And it definitely wasn't meant to be, but it was good to like experience. And yeah, and now I'm in this place and I definitely feel like the more and more I talk about it, the more I get women reaching out to me in my community. And for the most part, it's like privately people sharing that they are basically experiencing something really similar. And the hardest part about it for a lot of them is like they're married to men, you know, and so they experience when you get sober, you just have to start like sitting with yourself, you know, and there's a lot of things that come up. And so I know that I'm not alone, which is really beautiful in like that awareness. But yeah, it's like a huge, huge transition. And it feels really similar to sobriety in that, you know, when you get sober, you feel like you're the only person going through it. And then you slowly start, you know, stepping into the identity. And then more and more, you just build a sober world around you. And that kind of feels like what's been happening for me in the queer world. And so I'm gradually just like stepping into it more and more and connecting with people. But it's definitely like, yeah, it slowed my dating life.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I mean, it's one thing I know I've spoken to a lot of people. I left my marriage when I was sober, and then to date sober was brand new to me. I'd never done it before because I started drinking at the age of 12 before I even started dating, really. And I only went on like 1 or 2 dates, and they were both horrific. And then I ended up meeting my now husband. So I was very looked after in that sense. But it was hard because you didn't have that, you know, that Dutch courage. You didn't have that substance to kind of like settle the nerves or, you know, help you with socializing. So like, how have you overcome that? Because you've got the double whammy of, well, one, you're sober, but now you're dating women, which is a totally new experience.
Oh my God. So actually right before I got sober, this is kind of an interesting thing too. Right before I got sober, there were like multiple women that I took home, but I was like so drunk that I was like, I don't even know how this happened. Like I could not tell you how this person ended up in my, and the thing about that I'm really becoming aware of with dating men is like men are just like socialized to take all the initiative, right? And so that's why men like keep asking me out because that's their pattern. And so I'm in a place like Ubud where there's a lot of people that aren't drinking alcohol, but men have that confidence to kind of follow that social script even in sobriety, or some of them do, you know? Whereas as a woman being sober, it's like, I don't even know like who asks who out. And there was someone that I was like so sure was queer and I had such a crush on. And I was like, I feel like we're flirting. Like, I feel like this person likes me. And then to find out that she's straight was like a huge shock. Cause I was like, oh my God, I really misread that entire situation. And I think because my first experience with a woman when I was a teenager was this girl who really liked me, who kept trying to tell me that I was gay. And I was like, I'm not. I think I'm affected by that. And I really just want to I want to let people just come to their own identities. I don't want to be part of I don't want them to feel any pressure or whatever, you know? And so I am like in avoidance now of this person really liked because I just you know, I don't want to make her feel weird. And I get you know, and so I think that really shot my confidence because I'm like, okay, I don't have like the gaydar that I thought I did. And so
not yet. Maybe it can be developed.
Hopefully. Oh, hopefully. But yeah, I'm on the apps. But then the hard thing about the women's dating apps is like, well, in Bali is like, there's so many people passing through. And then like local women that are on the apps, they probably would never want to be in like a public relationship, I would imagine, just because of like the culture here. And then, oh my God, there's all these couples on dating apps that want you for like their threesome. And it's so weird. And you usually know because they posted couples pics, you know? But I accidentally matched with one and they keep messaging me to be like, we're really interested. And I'm just like, no.
It's a no from me.
Yeah, it's like definitely.
Let me know if you break up and I'll date each of you individually.
Yeah, but it's a minefield. It's really challenging. And in that time, there has been a couple men that have stood out to me of like, oh, I would like maybe date this guy. Like there was one guy who came to my Kirtan and my yoga class and he was like very sweet and was messaging me. And I was like, oh, this guy's like kind of cute. But I think I might have scared him off by posting about being a lesbian because I like haven't heard from him in a couple months. But you know, there are the rare men that I'm like, oh, maybe I could see something happening with that person. But I just feel like now that I've like discovered this like whole new beautiful world of like also, okay, being in a relationship with a woman, like even though the person I was with wasn't the right person, it's like a total shift in like, there's this whole dynamic in heterosexual relationships, I feel, of no matter what, like no matter how kind and like loving the man is, I don't think that they're aware of these power dynamics of like men compared to women. And I think that if you can be in relationship with men that are open to like learn and be aware and develop awareness, and it's not that they're all perpetuating this, but when I was with my ex, it was the first time that I was like, wow, I feel like we're equal in this relationship. And it was just like so beautiful. And I really want that again. So yeah, I'm hopeful. And then I had a friend say that she's like, well, maybe you're just not dating right now because you're still kind of hung up on this first woman that you dated. And so like you're not open yet to meeting a new person. And I do think that that could be true because in many ways it feels like it was like my first love, like this first woman I was with, you know? And so I'm just trying to be open and patient and let my journey into it unfold.
Of which it will, you know, you're so connected to the universe and God, and like it'll be in divine timing. Like I know that for sure. So I just and I love that you're claiming it, you know, and that you're speaking out loud and that you're truly stepping into this identity. It's incredible to witness. You mentioned earlier that you really noticed once you came out as queer that there was a deep self-hatred and a lack of self-worth. And I'm curious to know, Alexandra, how did you move through that?
Oh my God. It was like so big. Wow. It was so big. And you know, okay. So I would say there were two really, really big things that propelled me into realizing all of this. And one was my Kirtan practice, because Kirtan is like you're chanting a mantra over and over and over again. And when your mind becomes focused like that and you're connecting to the heart, there's like no way for a narrative to go on in the background. And the narrative eventually just like merges with the mantra. Right. And so I remember having this awareness as I was leading Kirtans, especially being in the audience of a Kirtan is powerful, but especially if you're in the band, because if you're in the band, you cannot lose focus or else you've totally, you've screwed up. And so it's like the most intense, which is okay, you know, but it's the most intense meditation that I've ever experienced. And it was in these moments that I started to realize that I was queer. And then the second thing was my meditation practice. And so I actually went for a 10-day Vipassana, Goenka style Vipassana, and I actually just registered to do it again in a couple months because that was like the moment for me. So I did 3 days where I basically was so tired that I would like fall asleep in the meditation seat. And I think it was because my body had like never rested so heavily before. And then it was like by the 4th day that I was like, oh my God, I'm a lesbian. And I had a lot of time in silent meditation because in Goenka style, you don't have a notebook, you can't write, you can't read, you can't text. There's no contact with the outside world. And it was like the longest duration of time that I was ever with myself in my entire life. And I just started getting all these memories, like all of these memories about, the adults in my life as a kid. And I started making a lot of connections of like where the roots were that came from this. And then I had this awareness, which I don't know if I came up with this on my own or if I had heard it. I have a gender studies degree. And so it's like, maybe I heard this idea in university, but on my Vipassana, I all of a sudden realized that like homophobia serves the patriarchy, right? Because in heterosexual relationships, a woman is usually in service in the relationship. She's helping with like food and cleaning and laundry and da, 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 right? So if we start dating each other, then that is going to like stop this dynamic. And same with if men start dating each other, right? And so homophobia is serving the patriarchy because it's perpetuating heterosexual and heteronormativity and making us so afraid to be divergent of that. And so I started having all these like epiphanies of like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to why I am the way I am. And by the 7th day of Vipassana, I actually had to stop basically doing the technique. And I started being convinced that there was like mold in the walls. And I think that was me being like, this is too much for me. So I'm just going to distract myself with something else. Which is okay because, the Vipassana in general, I would not say is for like the faint of heart. It's like the most intensely you'll ever sit with yourself.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't think I'm ready for it yet.
Yeah. And then listen to that and like wait until you're ready because it is like, it's very intense. And so once I got out of Vipassana, there were a couple of big pivotal moments for me when I tried to just go on as I was and I realized that I couldn't anymore. And there were a few moments where I realized like, I don't want to live like this anymore and I can't live like this anymore. And I don't want to do this to my kids and I don't want to do this to the people around me. Basically, I have to be like my truest self. And so I ended up actually working with my craniosacral therapist, and I've been working with her for years. And so she's a talk therapist and she does body work and does it at the same time. It's like very unique. Yeah. Everyone I talk to about cranio, I've stopped calling it cranio because everyone I talk to doesn't have this same experience. But through years and years, I had a very tight left quad for a long, long, long time. And I didn't realize that my quad was chronically in contraction and we could never really figure out what it was. And like, I basically think that this was it. But I had been repressing my sexuality so much that I couldn't even verbally talk to her about it on a conscious level. We would talk for an hour and then we would do the body work. And then that was when it would come up. And so it was a big investment. Like it's really expensive. And I was going every week for a period of time, but I knew that this was the only way that I could basically get through it. And and then it came to a point where I finally came out and I came out after I had a girlfriend. So I wasn't out when I was with her, but being with her basically made me out in Ubud at least because like people knew that we were dating, And so that served that purpose. But then I realized like I needed to come out if I wanted to date basically. And so that has kind of been the journey.
Wow. That is so huge and so interesting to understand like the depths of which you've unraveled it. I think it fascinates me beyond to think of just how much we hold in our bodies. And as you were sharing that, I'm thinking to myself, God, what would it look like to do that? Because I think, my experience has been that the work is never done. And that's why I love breath work so much because every single time more is revealed. And to think that, that repression of your sexuality was being stored in your left quad. And then that once you actually were able to fully embody that, how is your left quad going these days?
So the whole thing went from my left calf to my left quad to my left shoulder,
Oof.
which is so wild. And it had been there for years. And I notice it when if I lay down and I'm rocking my foot from side to side, I'm on my stomach, I don't feel it so intensely anymore, but it's taken like a really long unraveling because it was locked for so long. But I'm not feeling pain right now, for example. And I used to feel pain in all moments, like even when I was just sitting, I would feel it.
Wow.
And so, and I was complaining about it for years and I had all these theories. Like I thought it was because of being a yoga teacher and demoing on the right side and not the left. And, it was, and Yeah. And so the other night I actually met someone who was complaining about her whole left side. And I said, oh yeah, I used to have that. And now it's gone. I did a Vipassana. And she was like, oh, so you just did Vipassana and it's gone. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm also a lesbian. And I think I just like terrified her. I'm like, I'm not saying that you're a lesbian. I'm just saying that we all, we could be in contraction for many reasons. And that was
Yeah.
my awareness, and so it could be anything.
You've really got my mind thinking now. I'm like, my left side, I swear, ever since I started my YTT, I'm like, I'm like, live with anyway, we can go into it. It's a whole nother podcast. So we're coming towards the end of our conversation. I've just got two more questions for you, Alex. The one that I wanted to start with is, you talk about living a life today now that's rooted in presence, peace, and belonging. What does that actually look like, and what do you do on a daily basis to ground yourself in that?
I love that. Yeah. So my meditation practice has been the biggest part of this. I'm meditating every morning, usually at 5:45, and that has supported me in setting up my day for, to have a practice of awareness. And what does belonging look like? Wow, that's such a good question. I guess it's like creating a sense of belonging, not just for myself, but in the people I meet. Because I remember for so long just feeling like I didn't belong in so many ways. And so I guess it's like showing up with this like self-talk and awareness that's a universally felt feeling, right? And the more I can practice loving awareness in every day to the people I'm interacting with, then the more of a sense of belonging I'll create for both myself and others. I don't know if that made sense.
Absolutely. And it's clearly a core value of yours because you started that entire sober community, like that's come from a place of heart to me. Yes, it became a business, but that to me is so intuitively led that it's obviously, deeply ingrained in you. I'm curious, are you doing meditation at 5:45 for the sunrise?
I guess it is at sunrise. Yeah, that's the time of day when it's encouraged to practice basically in that transition when it's like darkest before the dawn. But I also think it's partially just my schedule because I'm often starting to teach at 7 and if I'm able to get up and do a meditation and then like have a walk and have a coffee, it can like fit in everything before my first practice, and so it's kind of both. Like I think I would do it later if I were able to but it's just gotten ingrained into me in a routine.
That's actually really helpful to know, and I think you're so right. I know I show up differently as a teacher if I have done my own practice first. And if that means getting up earlier, it's like it just creates a deeper level of embodiment, I feel.
Totally.
Not to say that you can't teach a great class without having done your own practice, but I'm definitely more grounded if I've taken the time to carve that out. So that's really good to know. My final question for you today, I ask all of my guests this, and it is, what are your 3 non-negotiables then that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
Wow, 3 non-negotiables. I mean, my meditation practice is one.